All right, so at this point in time, you should have a good understanding of how to create value going dark to light. Remember, that's all about the amount of pressure you're applying to your pencil. Also, how to burnish with both a white color pencil and a colorless blender. And the purpose of that is to make your paper totally covered with pencil and completely saturated. And finally, how to blend color pencils. And that's pretty much overlapping them, mixing them, so it looks like one is slowly changing into another color. So we're going to use these three simple techniques to help us color in something very realistic, for example, this eyeball. So that's what we're going to do right now. All right, so one of the first things I do before I start coloring is figuring out what kind of colors I need. So I usually always have black, white, and a colorless blender prepared. And then you have to choose what color you want for your iris of the eyeball. And I'm going to go with a blue eye. Here's the key though. I want you to have fun with color. I want you to push it a little bit. You don't have to just go with just a couple of different blues to fill that in and then use your black and white to blend it and burnish it. Use a variety of colors. I'm going to have a really dark blue. It's a blue indigo. A darker tone blue, a mid-tone, and then a light blue. I'm also going to throw in some different browns and oranges because orange is a complementary color of blue, and oftentimes those colors work well together and they complement each other and make each other pop a little bit. So the second thing I'm going to do is really analyze this eyeball and try my best to pay attention to really close details. And I personally, and this doesn't mean it's the only way you can do this, but I like to map out where the darker shadows belong in the image and then continue on from there. So I have my black color pencil and I'm going to fill in the pupil of the eyeball black, and it looks like there's a really dark border around the iris. So I'm going to fill that in black, using a little bit of value coming in so it would be easier to blend my colors. I'm not going to worry about the outside part of the eye or the white part right now. I'm just going to focus on the actual iris and pupil of the eyeball. So let's go on with our black color pencil. Now notice how I did not get too crazy with the black color pencil. The reason for that, I know these areas look really dark, especially the center of the pupil and around the outer part of the iris. The reason I didn't go crazy with black is because I'm using a variety of tones of blue, and this blue indigo is really dark, and that's gonna also create those darker tones for me. So right now, I'm gonna take that blending I started with, I'm gonna take that value I started with, and I'm going to blend right on top of it. So I'm going to take that black color pencil and blend it in with this dark blue, this blue indigo. Another key thing you want to keep in mind is your level of focus. And you really want to pay attention to the different tones or the lighter areas and darker areas of your image. As you can see in this iris, the outside edge is really dark and there's some value going inside with some interesting line texture. And towards the center of the ring of the iris, it's very light. If you just use the same like blue tone throughout the whole thing, you lose that effect. All right, there's no light highlight in here, just a little bit of a dark border here. That's not going to give you the same effect as going from dark to light, and here's what that would look like. So this one looks way more realistic because I paid closer attention to where the dark areas are and also where the lighter areas are. And that's just using a high level of focus. So I'm going to continue on with my dark blue. I'm going to use some value and blend it in with the black, and I'm going to continue on with my other blues on top of it while I'm paying attention to the dark blues and light blue areas. So notice how now I'm really paying attention to these small intricate details. I'm noticing some darker marks kind of coming out at a little angle there. Some little marks coming out, creating some radial symmetry from the center of the eyeball. There's also some little intricate line details coming in from the outside part of the eyeball or the iris. And eventually I'm going to blend this in with some of my lighter blues. But you can start this even early on in the process with your darker colors. So once you get to a point where you have your darks laid out and you left plenty of space for your light areas, you can take one of your lighter tones and almost use this to burnish your area with. And what this is going to do is kind of blend those colors together. You don't have to press down too hard because it might lighten it up a little bit. You might want to go back in and darken it up with your other colors. And you can carry this on into the lighter parts of the eyeball. And I like to work with little ovals or little circles to keep my colors nice and smooth, unless you're trying to create more of a texture. In that case, you can use more lines when you're moving with the color pencil. So I definitely lighten all that up. I'm gonna go back in with my darker colors and get some of my darks back. Once you get to a stage where you're pretty comfortable with your lights and darks, go ahead and feel free to throw in some fun colors in here, some colors that might not really normally be in that area, but they might let your current colors kind of pop. So I'm gonna throw some oranges and browns in here. Once I feel pretty happy about the lights and darks and my color, I'm going to go in with a white and burnish it all. One of the most common mistakes with burnishing is somebody just going in one direction, going over the entire area. That's a mistake because you're going to smear all your colors together. Very strategically burnish in the areas you want to look nice and smooth, but only blend the colors in you want to. So I'm not going to blend this black all the way into the colorful part. Right now I'm just burnishing the lighter area of the iris. While creating this extreme detail too, it's important to keep your pencils very sharp, especially if you're trying to make little tiny thin lines of detail. One thing I do to keep my pencil sharp is I constantly kind of turn it using the crisp, sharpened edge of it. Go ahead and burnish the pupil a little bit to get a little bit more of a glossy look. Oftentimes that overdoes it, so I have to go back in with the black to darken it up a tad. So that's pretty much my process of coloring in something like a realistic eyeball right here. Some things I really focused on was using value, especially when I blended. Blending a variety of colors, not just a couple of colors, because if you just use a couple of colors, you might end up with something that looks a little bit more flat, like this. Another key thing to focus on is really having a sharp focus on where the darker parts of the eye are and where the lighter parts are. And if you can see the difference here between this eyeball and this one, the main difference is I have lots of value and it goes dark to light, and it really brings that eyeball to life, where this eyeball looks a lot more flat and it's more of the same tone going through the iris. Whereas in the actual photo, you can clearly see it goes really dark around the edges. Obviously the pupil is really dark, but right in the middle of this iris right in here, there's some really light tones. And if you pay attention to those things, you can really create some realistic looking texture with different realistic images.